Hello, my name is Robin, your capital advisor here in Portland, and welcome to the latest installment on business loan shorts. Today, we're going to talk about forecasting for business loans. And many clients or businesses that I work with struggle to develop a forecast that are necessary for producing their forecast that an underwriter or a lender wants to see. And that's largely because there's a lot of uncertainties, unknowns, especially for young businesses. And so today we'll talk a little bit about forecasting and give some tips on how you can develop a forecast for a business loan. The audience for this video are businesses that are seeking loans with at least 1 year of revenue and financial statements. If you're a startup business, that's fine. You can certainly welcome to listen. But understand that you will need to have some basic, most business loans require some existing revenues and financial statements to work from. So hence the requirement of historical revenues and financial statements. The other scope of this video is that this is forecasting for planning and securing a business loan. There are many different reasons why one would want to do a forecast. But today we're just going to focus strictly on doing forecasts for business loans. While some of the principles that we'll be talking about can apply for other types of forecasts or other reasons for forecasts, we'll keep this strictly for business loans. And always a big shout out and thank you to Prosper Portland, their Inclusive Business Resource Network, which is enabling these videos to happen and is being produced for the IBRN community. So let's just get into it. Today's agenda, we'll talk about why you do forecasting. We'll talk a little bit about what forecasting is and is not, the different types of forecasts that are out there, and some common challenges that are associated with forecasting, and how to, some approaches for addressing those challenges. And then we'll go through a quick example of a fictitious company that is looking for business loans. So why forecast? Why is a lender asking for a forecast? They want, a couple reasons. One, a lender, really wants to assess your ability to repay the loan. The forecast is going to show, are you basically generating enough revenue or profits to repay the loan, and what risks are associated with that. So lenders will scrutinize the forecast because they want to know if they can get repaid. It's also helpful for you to explore scenarios as you make plans for securing a loan. You might have a small, medium, and large size loan that you want to get, and that's a $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 loan. Just because you want a $100,000 loan doesn't mean that you'll get a $100,000 loan from a lender. So you might have to do some scenario planning. And so a forecast is a good way of saying, okay, what can I do and what are the returns for a $25,000 loan, a $50,000 loan, a $100,000 loan, whatever your scenario is. You can tweak the numbers, play around with it, and see, does your plans pencil out to secure and support the loan? And then as you iterate and as you go through this process, you really begin to understand the risks that you and the lender might be being exposed to with getting a loan. So there might be scenarios where you just might say, hey, this is just too risky. I'm really pushing the edge of the limits in terms of risk. I really don't want to take on that risk. And so your forecast might tell you, don't do it because it's too risky. Or conversely, you might see the different scenarios and you say, hey, easy peasy, this is no problem, all the scenarios look good, this is a low risk investment opportunity, loan opportunity, and you feel more confident about pursuing a loan. So it gives you a better ability to understand the risks that are associated with getting a business loan. Let's talk about what forecasting is and is not. First off, is not. Forecasting, while it may feel this way, it's not a random number or a number that you make up. I once had a prospective lender come to me, and I said, they showed me the forecast, and I said, this is not going to work. And I said, you're not generating enough profits. So he took the spreadsheet, penciled in some new numbers without, just making up numbers, and gave it back to me and said, how does this look? That is not a forecast. There's logic, there's rationale behind all the numbers. We'll go through that a little bit later. It's not a commitment. It will and can change. The forecast is a living document, and it's meant to just adapt, understand the latest scenarios and the latest plans, and what you predict as going forward in the coming months and years. Conditions will change, assumptions will change, so it's going to be completely evolving. A forecast is not precise or perfect. You will be wrong. I've never met anybody that produced a 100% accurate forecast. If people could predict the future, people would be doing really well in the stock market, and that's not the case. There's always other factors, externalities, your assumptions. You will be wrong. The idea for a forecast is to kind of get to a ballpark where you have high degree of confidence that the numbers will fall into place in that ballpark. Now let's talk about what a forecast is. A forecast is achievable and realistic. That's earlier scenario where I said the person just made up the numbers. I don't know if those numbers were achievable or realistic. Your forecast needs to be achievable and realistic. It could stretch the limits, it could push the edge of the envelope, but it's still achievable and realistic. And a forecast is also a means for you to defend your numbers. If you're talking to a lender or any investor and you're showing them the numbers, they're going to say, why are these sales so high, or these costs so low, or whatever. By having the numbers, by going through the exercises of coming up with the numbers, you'll have confidence in an understanding of the numbers so that you can explain and defend why you have numbers in front of you that you present in front of you. Most lenders will ask you at some point during the underwriting process, they'll ask you, what's up with this number? What's up with that number? This gives you an opportunity to explain and defend them. So let's talk about types of forecasts. Anything can be forecast, financials, headcount, inventory output. You can forecast a zillion things, for your businesses, and depending on the nature of the business, you may or may not want to develop those forecasts, and depending on what's important to you. However, from a lender's perspective, they typically want to see three types of forecasts. The first is the profit and loss. What they really want to see is, are there sufficient profits to repay the loan? The second they want to see is cash flow. And is there sufficient cash to repay the loan and remain solvent? Knowing that businesses are cyclical, they're good months, they're bad months. They want to make sure that you have sufficient cash over the term of the loan to make the periodic payments and not have a problem with them. And then in many cases, the profit and loss is very similar to cash flow, but there are certain, as your business gets bigger and more complex, the profit and loss forecast and the cash flow forecast will start to diverge from each other. For today's purpose of the conversation, we're going to assume that the profit and loss is going to be very similar to the cash flow. And the final thing is the balance sheet. The balance sheet kind of states your positions on, cash and debt and liability and equity and all that good stuff. And so a balance sheet forecast allows a lender to look at key lending ratios and thresholds to see if there's too much risk in your business. One often ratio that's used is the debt to equity ratio, which is, how much debt is there versus the equity in a business. And there's no particularly good number or bad number. It depends on your industry. Some industries, some businesses are intentionally highly leveraged. In other words, have a lot of debt. That's okay for certain businesses. But there are other businesses that, are not, designed, for lack of a better word, to accommodate a lot of debt. So there's no good, right, or wrong answer, but the underwriter is going to want to look at, key ratios from your balance sheet, again, to assess the risk. So forecasting starts really with the profit and loss. Most of us, when we do an initial forecast, a business plan, we start with the profit and loss, statement, and then all the others can be derived from it: the cash flow, the balance sheet, and any others that you typically want. For today's video, we're just going to focus strictly on the profit and loss. It's the simplest. Cash flow is often the same, as I said, but as you get bigger, you probably want to consult a financial advisor to help develop a cash flow. And then similar with a balance sheet, you can be able to, you probably want to consult with a financial advisor to take your profit and loss and portray it into a balance sheet forecast. So we'll focus today on just the profit and loss. So first step, we're going to do this in layers. And the first step of doing a forecast is laying the foundation. And you start with your historical profit and loss statement, maybe the last 2 years, however far you can go back. That is a great starting point. You take last year's, financials, and you start with that. And then we're going to apply multiple layers of assumptions or best guesses on top of that. And some of the layers that we want to lay on top of the historical profit and loss statement are general trends, historical patterns. So maybe there are strong months and weak months, or maybe you've shown a gradual improvement year over year, and so you can continue to apply those trends to your forecast. So these are just historical patterns that you can kind of extrapolate, going forward. Then you look at, operating conditions. What is changing in your business, in your industry, anything that impacts your business. Are sales of certain products or services increasing or decreasing? Are costs going up, costs going down? As a business owner, you probably have a good understanding of how the industry, how your business is trending. So we add another layer, that starts reflecting the changes in the operating conditions that are affecting your business. And then you kind of, factor in any events or anticipated changes. Maybe, you are, selling goods and you got admitted or accepted to do this, fantastic trade show in 6 months that could represent a huge opportunity for you. And so you want to reflect that, okay, 6 months from now in June-ish, we're going to go to a trade show and we're going to be able to bump up, revenues by 25%. So, anything that you anticipate changing, you add that as another layer to reflect things that are changing. And then investments, right? Your loan, you're getting a loan to make that investment in your business, so hopefully it can grow. And so you make that investment and you forecast, what's changing. There's obviously going to be an expense, right? If you buy a new piece of equipment, that's a new, expense that you have. But if, your equipment is going to allow you to produce more widgets, then, you have to increase your raw materials, your ingredients, whatever, you're manufacturing, if you're a manufacturer, because you're going to be able to produce more. At the same time, you're going to also be able to sell more. And so that means you're going to reflect more, sales or more revenue into your business. So the moment you make that investment, you want to start figuring out, how are my costs going to change? How are my profits and revenue going to change, and reflect them into your business? Those are the 4 kind of typical ones that you start with in a forecast. But anything else that comes to mind or impacts your business, you can kind of add another layer of assumptions on top of your financials and factor them into your forecast. Now, once you start, building these layers of assumptions on top of it, the next step is to validate your numbers. And the scenario here is you look at the numbers from a few different perspectives, and making sure that all these different perspectives, it makes sense. So, one is, can you meet your obligations? Payroll, rent, loan payments, profits requirements that you may have, whatever is required of your business. Can you meet those obligations? And so when you do a forecast, you look at the numbers, and if you can't meet those, obligations, then you got to tweak something in your forecast. You got to do something to cut back costs, or you got to do something to increase revenues. So that's one validation. Another one is your desired outcomes and goals, right? Are you making those changes? Are you achieving in your forecast the desired, goals? Oftentimes it's a profitability goal. I make an investment in this equipment, it's going to allow me to produce more, and it's going to allow me to double my profits. When you do your forecast, are you doubling your profits? Are you meeting your goals? Again, if not, that's something that you need to address. Um, and then what I call pass the sniff test, right? And that is really, is it achievable, realistic, and tolerable risk? I know sometimes, especially if it's new, you're a new business owner, it might be a little change, but and business owners tend to be optimistic, but put on your, take off your optimistic hat, put on your pessimistic hat for the moment, and ask yourself, are these numbers achievable, realistic, and tolerable risk? And sometimes you have to ask an outsider, and that's the last bullet item that I have here. Is ask an outsider, an advisor, a business partner, someone that you trust and value their opinion. Have them look at the numbers and ask them if it passes the sniff test. Do your numbers compare to competitor results or industry standards? Right. Certain industries operate within these certain parameters: profit, revenue, costs, and if your forecast is within those ranges, then that's reasonable. But if you're above or below the range for your business, that's sometimes something to scratch your head about, because hundreds and thousands of businesses like yours have provided their financials and operate within this range, and yet you somehow are operating outside of this range. So something to kind of really kind of think about. Here in Portland, or in the Portland area, you can go to the library to get these industry standards. The Small Business Development Centers, SBDC, they also have access to some industry ratios that you can look at and see if they're appropriate numbers for your business. And then are internal results compatible or aligned with each other? So what I mean by that is, you look at your forecasts and does the marketing costs align with the sales that you're generating? The labor costs align with the operating production costs that you have. It's going back to when I took the SATs, right? And if you have extra time, they said double check your numbers, make sure that the numbers kind of work together with each other. So the same thing here. Make sure the key things that are important with your business, that they kind of work with each other. And then, as I said earlier, have an advisor, an outsider, even a lender review them. Some lenders, particularly community lenders, they might provide some assistance and look at the numbers and give you some feedback. So now you've validated, you've gotten all this feedback. You iterate, right? You modify your assumptions and your conditions to update the forecasts, so that they address some of the validation issues that you identified. And then you repeat this step process, step 1, step 2, step 3, over and over again, until the numbers start to, all the validations, start to kind of have check boxes next to them. And this is an ongoing process. You might do a forecast, 3, 4 iterations up front, and then you hone in on the numbers. You go to your lender, and they give you some feedback. You iterate a little bit more, and so it can happen in spurts. It can happen over time. It can happen, every quarter, every 6 months. As your business change, the conditions change, you might want to update your forecast. So you iterate as often as you want. One other question I get often is the time frames. How much time should I forecast in terms of the period, the intervals, and the overall length of the forecasts? And while forecast requirements will vary from lender to lender, this table here kind of summarizes the general time frames that are involved. Typically you want to forecast for the term of the loan. But, for the first year, first year forecast, you want to have a granularity. You want to show, every month how things are going, every month. This forecast needs to be kind of highly accurate, and you probably put in the most amount of efforts compared to the other two, which I'll talk about. And in some sense, this makes sense. This is going to be your budget, for your next year. So think of it as also as a budgeting process, and feeding into your planning process. Then years 2 and 3, these are very important forecasts as well, but maybe you don't have to get, every month. Maybe you can do it every quarter. If it's easy for you to do it every month, by all means, do it every month. But, you can probably get away with doing a forecast, every quarter for years 2 and 3. And compared to year 1, you don't have to scrutinize the numbers as much. The accuracy doesn't have to be that high, and the effort that you put into developing the numbers doesn't have to be that high. And the purpose for this is just to kind of set the stage for anticipating plans in the next year or two. So year 1 is the budget. Year 2 is okay. These are my plans, and I want to make sure that when I end year 1, that I can start going to year 2 and 3. And then years 3 and 4 and beyond. To be honest, this is a guess. No business doing a 1-year forecast is a challenge. Doing a 3-year forecast really is a guess. And so I wouldn't put a huge amount of effort or accuracy, or effort to making these numbers, accurate. Do your best case, and do it in a way that you think is achievable and realistic. But compared to year 1, much less, accuracy. And like I said, it's a guess. In terms of granularity, it's okay to do this once a year. So you don't have to do it every month, for years 3, 4, and beyond. Just do a forecast for the year. And this serves as your guiding star, right? It's your long-term direction that you want to, take your business. Again, various vendors may have different requirements, but absence of talking to a lender, these are some of the timeframes that you want to think about when you're doing a forecast. So we'll kind of wrap this up with an example. And in a few moments, we'll cut over to a spreadsheet, but the background about this example is I chose a retail fortune-telling business since we're doing forecasts, and I thought this would be an appropriate business. And this business operates, a storefront that does fortune telling. And so what's happening with this business is that you've noticed over time the foot traffic is down, and foot traffic is a big part of your business, and you see your sales from walk-ins declining. Your plan is, next year you're going to go online. That you could do some social media investing. You're going to hire an SEO expert, do some online advertising, and start offering your fortune-telling businesses online. And then in years 2 to 3, you're going to introduce an online tarot reading platform. It's very different from what you've been doing, but you've heard that it's also a lucrative and profitable market. And then in years 3 and beyond, you're going to make an investment. You're going to get a loan and tap into the high margin, highly profitable celebrity fortune telling market. So that's what's going to happen. And I'm going to cut over to the forecast or spreadsheet. And we're going to start with 2023, right? This video is being made in early 2024. So we're going to look at our 2023 financials. That's our baseline. And it's a very simple financial statement that I've done every month. I'm tracking, the revenues. And right now in 2023, we just have retail or storefront revenues. And you see, that for each month for 2023. I have placeholders for other revenue sources, but in 2023 we have no other revenue. And then costs, just some very basic costs that I'll be modeling in this. By no means is this inclusive of everything. but the idea is to, give you a sense of what's going on. So we're now here with 2023. We have the financials, and we're going now start doing a 2024 forecasts. So ignore the colors for now, but you'll notice at the very top here, we have 2024. And essentially, this is a copy of the 2023 financials. And in fact, you'll see here, this is the total 2024 profits, $83,306, and the same exact from 2023. So this represents zero change. So this is our baseline. This is where we're starting from. So the first thing I'm going to start adjusting is I'm going to be introducing some trends that I notice that is happening, and I'm just going to introduce that by clicking a 1 there that turns on these additional expenses and revenues. And I'm here modeling retail sales is growing, growth, right? And I said that it's actually decaying. So you see a -5%, -5%, -6%. This is how I'm modeling the decrease in retail sales due to the fact that there is less foot traffic in the area. And then I'm also going to factor in, the lease is going to increase. And so on January, the lease increases by 2%. And so I've factored that in as well. And so these set of changes are green. And if you notice in the greens here, these are now updated with these two assumptions that I have just talked about. And so right now, if that's the only change that's happening to the business, you notice that we have reduced sales, increased lease, and so we're going to actually right now, if we did nothing else, $7,154 less in profits than last year. That's your first layer of assumptions. Now, we said we're also going to go online mid-year, okay? And this going online is going to involve hiring a part-time social media person. It's going to involve doing some online advertising, and that's going to result in some additional sales. So we're going to turn that on. And in May, we're going to hire a social media expert, $1,500 part-time, $1,500 a month in additional wages. And you'll see that showing up now here on the wage item. We'll do some online advertising and a month after they start. And so now you see that reflected, here as well. And then you start seeing some online sales, right? And this is your forecast. It's, kind of a guess, but, this is what you think is a reasonable online sales. And so that's now reflected here in the orange up on the revenue line. Now, you take a look at these numbers and you say, whoa, you do your first validation and you say, okay, I'm going to make $14,000 less than I did last year. And you kind of scratch your head. It's like, this doesn't make sense. I'm making these investments, but I'm losing, I'm making less money than I did last year. And for you, this is not meeting objective. So you start talking around, you maybe go to a colleague of yours who is doing, a similar work and moved online, and they look at the numbers and say, oh, yeah, this is all accurate. But when I went online, a few years ago, my sales were easily 2 to 3 times higher. Your forecasts are way too low. And so, that is a legitimate feedback because it's someone who did that. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase this to 2.5 times, right? Average between 2 to 3 times. And lo and behold, you punch in the numbers, you update the forecast, and now you're making, $780 less than last year. That's acceptable. Ideally, you make more, but it's acceptable for now. So the next set of assumptions is a year from now, we're going to launch an online tower reading forecast, program. And so the forecast of that is going to include, how much additional sales are you going to get and what platform fees are going to result or going to cost you for going online. So we'll turn those on, and this is all reflected in the purples. And this shows up. You'll see in 2023, 5, and 2026, I'm doing these forecasts quarterly. I'm not doing the full math as you saw, prior, because it's just going to be tons of numbers and confusing. But you would extrapolate, these assumptions, from the first two into the future years. So now, I've reflected the costs. I see that, revenue is going up, each year. And these are my, costs, for the online tarot reading platform. And these are now reflected in purple. Again, if you did the full math, you'd be able to see, are these numbers, making sense and or not. And then finally, 3 or so years from now, you're going to launch the celebrity market. And that's going to require some higher end video equipment and processing. This is, high end celebrities. You need to have like a picture perfect, video connection. So that requires some additional equipment and other upgrades. And that's where you're going to get your loan from to pay for that. But then it'll also going to result in, some, hopefully great sales that you anticipate. So that's reflected in the blue here, and we're going to turn that on. And you'll see here that, we're going to get a $20,000 loan that's going to cost us, allow us to, spend $20,000 in, video investments. But then we'll start, reaping, some sales kind of going forward. And again, these are now reflected in your forecast. Again, you just extrapolate, some of these other assumptions that you made from 2024 and bring them into 25, 26, and 27. So there you have it. This is, let me turn off the screen here. This is your basic forecast. Again, you make some assumptions and you just put layer on top of layer on top of layer of assumptions, and grow from there. You iterate and then or you validate and then you iterate.